best piece of advice that you've gotten in your career?
Show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and don't be married to the results.
So just going after like what keeps your fire going and what keeps you alive.
We encourage you to use AI, but we want you to check the answers and be responsible for them and make sure they're right.
Okay, welcome guys. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Maybe quickly, do you guys just want to introduce yourself really quickly and what's going on?
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Saba. I'm the CTO at Certn. I lead product and engineering, design, IT, and security at Certn. I've been with Certn almost a year, and before that I was at Neo Financial.
Hey, good evening. Cullen, Jennings. I'm one of the CTOs at Cisco. I lead the group that does all of our collaboration, video conferencing, call center type products, as well as our AI products. Been there quite a while, and it's been worked on a range of different things over the years. So pleasure to be here tonight.
Amazing. This is so fun. For you guys, what I wanted to do is kind of walk through the role of AI in the workforce and how that's changing both sort of past, present, and future. Then I want to talk about some like architecture hot topics, data sovereignty, and what to think about now with data sovereignty as it becomes increasingly a hot topic. And then I want to close off with cybersecurity and what's going on. But I want to start by asking you guys a couple of quick hot topics. My first question for both of you is, what is the best piece of advice that you've gotten in your career so far?
Yeah, I think the best piece of advice I've ever gotten is not to be afraid to take risks. And if someone is, like saying no to you about something, but you can do it, just go for it. So basically it's just like being ambitious and going for what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I also think there's like a reframing of risk that we should have of like, we often think that it's risky to go off and be entrepreneurial and make the leap. But we should probably start thinking that actually not doing that is risky, right? Like staying in a 9-to-5, being status quo, that can often actually be even more risky, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just going after like what, keeps your fire going and what keeps you alive, rather than always like hedging on the safer side. So like my entire career has been in startups. Yeah. I love that hustle and like the risk that comes with working at startups, solving new problems, doing a million things at once. So that's kind of like what keeps me going, and just not being afraid to jump on a new challenge or take on a new risk. I think, yeah, if I would give anyone advice, it'd be that.
Yeah, amazing. Cullen, same question to you. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Well, that's good advice right there. But this sounds a little pithy, but I mean, I think it's, I've always tried to sort of show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and don't be married to the results. And it's funny, when you start thinking about people doing things, they often fail at even the first stage of those, or are so married to the results that they can't just move on and take risk. I mean, there's all those stages you see people failing at. So I think about those when things aren't going well for me. Am I failing one of these? And yeah, often you are.
Yeah, okay, that's amazing. Bit of authenticity and humility a bit. Sticking to that theme, what's the biggest mistake that you've ever made, and how did you solve it?
Well, like my list of really stupid ideas is long. Many of them involve, kites and snowboards. But when I think of really thinking about that in the business sense, is timing is where my worst mistakes have done. So my first startup company, we made a 300 baud modem. It was a software-defined modem. It took a lot longer to make than we thought it would, and we got it to market right about the time that everybody was moving to 1200 baud modems. That didn't go very well, and ever since, that was my first company, and it failed around timing. And since then, I've really focused on timing. I feel like a lot of companies actually try things too early. Actually, it's one of the things that you sort of see, and in this startup mentality, you get this feeling like, yeah, I've got to do it now. There's 10 other people doing the same thing. And when you actually look at the history of startups companies, many of them fail because they were too early. Many of them fail because they were too late. But I think on all of this stuff, timing's critical, and really trying to think about what are the roadmaps, where are the road signs? What's going to happen that I will know that now is the right time to do whatever plan I'm thinking about? I think that that's a pretty key thing to think about.
Yeah, okay. Saba, same question to you. The biggest mistake, when have you failed?
Oh, many things. But for me, it's like a bit of a thing of being overly optimistic around timelines and like not always factoring in like the time to like understand like the unknowns around things. So for example, we're undergoing a huge migration right now on Certn from one platform to another. And we're like, yeah, we'll get it done in 2 months. And like, you know, that's never the case. But there's always that just like blind optimism around how long a big project or a big migration is going to take. So I think it's like, but then you don't want to over-index on the unknown unknowns because then you get paralyzed and like you can't actually do anything. So it's just balancing those two, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Shifting now to the workforce and designing your teams. We're not going to have a lot of conflict on this one because you guys are both leading remote teams. But Saba, you were previously at Neo, famously 5 days in office, and now have become the CTO at Certn, entirely remote, right? Mm-hmm. How has that transition been? And maybe talk to me a little bit about the pros and cons of both those sort of workforces.
Yeah, I actually miss going into the office. What we're doing now is shifting from fully remote into basically centers of excellence in cities. So we hired a few developers here in Calgary, so we're looking at getting a co-working space to get people in once in a while. We have an office in Victoria. We're trying to encourage people to go into the office more often, and then a co-working space in Toronto. So I think the ideal situation is hybrid. Where you go in a few days a week, where you can, like whiteboard together, solve problems together. Like that human connection, I think, is super important, even if it's just to socialize and like grab a coffee with someone. But then, go home, have your focus time, because like I focus really well when I'm at home as well. So trying to get like best of both worlds. I think, would work super well. So that's kind of the model that we're transitioning towards. We're shifting away from fully remote.
You should come bunk up with Seb and I. Where's Seb? In the back. We would love to have you guys. Yeah, we just talk shit all day, but you can join us in our co-working space. Cullen, how about yourself? You were in San Francisco working with the Cisco team, and you said, I would much prefer to be in Calgary, running remote. So now you have teams across the globe, right? What's it like running effective teams in different time zones?
So, I mean, I'll sort of tell a little bit of journey here of going one direction probably too far and now shifting back the other direction. I think it is a balance to be made here. So I was living in San Francisco and spending several of my hours a day in a car and just realized I could be more effective. And I told the CEO of Cisco at that time, we build the world's best remote work video conferencing products in the world, and I'm moving to Calgary. And he's like, huh. And at that time, every executive was at a head office. And he said, okay. And that's how that wasn't, I mean, I didn't start that trend, but a lot of people, that was a time where Cisco started moving, instead of having a few core sites, which is how we'd been before, we started getting we just embraced a remote and hybrid work in a very strong way. And that worked to a certain degree. It allowed us to hire people that we couldn't have hired other places. That was definitely a pro for it. But right now, the collaboration group I'm CTO for has people in 272 locations in 56 countries. And no one would ever design a company like that. That is not a good thing. It is a mess. And the problem is time zones. So we are now trying to sort of consolidate where we call like full teams. And what we mean by this is in a location, and look, this is just a journey. It's not like Cisco's going to move here overnight or whatever. But the direction we're trying to shift towards is that in a given location, we can have the industrial designers, we can have the test people, we can have the project managers, we can have the product manager for that part of the product, and the developers for it, all in a similar place. If it's one office, that's even better. It's great. Sometimes it's just being in roughly the same time zone. Time zones are the enemy of all work, right? This is the problem. And so we're trying to balance where we can hire talent at a global scale, what we pay for that talent, and I'm glad to talk more about sort of our views on how that happens. But we're trying to not have a situation that we've often found ourselves in, where we've got a development team in China, we've got a product management team that's running that product in California, and we have the other half of the development team in Oslo or London. And you cannot, yes, you can stretch your day so that you can try and work, you can span the mornings with Europe, but if you're trying to do evenings with China and mornings with Europe, you will burn out and it doesn't work and the teams fail. And it makes slow decisions. We have had things where it's a decision that should take an hour, where we spend 2 weeks trying to schedule the meeting to get the hour decision. That is a ridiculous way to run a company. We've also had times where a bug just gets fixed around, like you wake up in the morning and the bug you reported last night is fixed. But there's a big trade-off on that. So if you're developing teams, think about time zones. Think about who needs to be communicating with each other in a really tight loop and how to accelerate your business. It's like speed is what matters, so figure that out.
That's awesome. A term, I'm going to stick with you, Cullen, actually, for right now. A term I learned recently, and I can't stop using it. I don't even know if I'm using it well, but is labor arbitrage, which is like the concept that talent and development talent is cheaper other places, and so if you want to get something done at a cheaper rate, you can contract folks. I'm curious your thoughts on where is the cheaper talent, and how do you see that labor arbitrage playing out in your teams?
Yeah, so I mean the first most important thing is, dollars per hour don't really matter. You need dollars per work to a certain degree, right? Obviously some places deliver more, right? So the most expensive location Cisco has, bar none, is San Jose and Silicon Valley, San Francisco, any way you count it. Now, there are reasons we have that there. We have access to certain talent. We've often acquired companies that are startup companies in that space that are based there, so you end up with that talent, and it's fine. Like, it's not like that talent's going away, or not like we're moving away from that. That will be there, but that's the most expensive location for us. And then we start looking at, there's always a joke about one of the contracting companies we use that delivers really great value for us. I'm not going to name the company, but they're based they're based in Victoria on Vancouver Island, and we always joke about we're offshoring it, and that's sort of true. So when we start looking at the cost of things, we have a bunch of developers in China. That has become a progressively more expensive place over time for us to do work, and it's become politically turbulent and complicated to do some of the stuff there as well. We also have a lot of people in India. I would say in the past 7 years, our prices per unit of work has probably tripled in India. The prices of India are rising rapidly. And so some of the cheapest places for us right now are often really, you have to factor in these shred-like tax credits. Like, look, if you are doing a startup and you are not talking to these people and getting your shred here, stop what you're doing, go do that. And all the other things don't matter, right? So those make a huge difference to cost. So in Ireland, we get about 35% back. As probably one of the highest countries doing that. So once you start factoring that in, Ireland becomes a fairly cheap place for us. Poland, Slovakia, some of those places. London, Canada are sort of in our medium sort of expenses. Canada varies a lot depending on where you're talking in Canada, as I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced, but it's been a pretty good place. And one of the things about Canada, Ireland, and Israel is the quality of engineers we get in those locations is really great, and it has to do with tracing back to the universities, the quality of the universities. So that's one of the things that makes a big difference for us.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue for you, Saba. As we look at hiring and junior hiring coming into university, I mean, a lot of these tech companies have removed their junior engineering jobs. I think maybe late last year there was like a decline of like 80% of all junior engineering jobs. And that kind of ties into also like youth and unemployment in Canada is something like 14%. Alberta specifically might be a little bit higher by 1%. I'm curious your thoughts on AI's role in replacing junior talent in some of these tech companies. Are you seeing that as something that tech companies are doing, or how are you seeing companies react to that?
Yeah, definitely. Because using AI I always compare AI to a junior developer, right? So as a senior developer, now you have at your disposal a bunch of junior developers that you can work with, build agents, build skills, automated like workflows. So it does definitely replace, some of the entry-level roles that you would hire. So that's definitely like anyone you talk to, you're like, why would I hire a junior developer if I can use all these tools, all these agents at my disposal? I can increase my productivity. I don't have to mentor someone. I don't have to ramp up someone. So there's definitely that narrative for sure. The thing that we're a bit short-sighted on is that who's your next level of senior is going to be. Like you do need to continue to like, your seniors used to be your juniors, right? So there's definitely a bit of a short-sightedness there. But what's interesting though is that something that we're going to start experimenting with is instead of hiring traditional support roles on our CS team, we want to hire developers because a lot of the tools on support are AI tools now. So yes, in some way, some of those entry roles might, phase out or not be as popular, but they'll actually start popping up somewhere else. Because like what AI has done is it democratized writing software, right?
Right.
So the biggest advantage or like the biggest opportunity for us as like tech companies is finding the areas in the business that are slower to adopt technology. So for my team, like engineering is just like running light years ahead with AI, right? Like, I don't know, my staff developer every day like writes me like, oh, look at this like skills thing I wrote, or look at this agent I built.
Yeah.
But then, you look at the CS team where actually they could automate a million things on CS. They're not adopting any of those tools, which is not surprising because developers were always taught to like be on the front end of like new tools, new languages. We're always excited about new advancements, where some of the other non-technical functions of the business don't do that. So like, how do you bring in that excitement for new technology and that advancement for automation? We'll just put developers on those teams. So that's kind of the approach that we're going to be doing.
I love that. Yeah, that's so cool.
So it's not, so like I think it's just going to be an evolution of those entry-level roles. Where there's going to be other opportunities in the business outside of just engineering where new talent can come in, which is really exciting.
I love that.
Yeah.
Cullen, are you seeing something similar as well in the AI, like replacing youth employment?
So I think I'm a little bit different direction on this. And I got to say, too, that like I think a large portion of my colleagues at Cisco would agree exactly with what you just said on this. I think, and people assume, given the role and the impact I have with AI at Cisco, that I'll be very super pro on this stuff. And I am pro on AI, but I view it as a tool that's really, you need to understand how to use it, you need to know what it needs to do, and the way to be effective writing software using AI is to leverage the things it's good at and complement it with the things it's bad at, with the architecture and the other things that you need to drive at a high level to make it really work, at the guidance of checking it did the right thing, of figuring out how to structure the problem. I mean, like, I have this odd thing. I have 10,000 engineers. I could roughly go tell what they're doing, and I can't get anything done. So it makes me deeply understand that, just having AI that you can tell what to build won't result in the software that you want, because we're bad at saying what we want. So, all of those types of analytical skills are very important. And often we're finding the people that are embracing those more are some of the young and career engineers are more open to these types of changes and really thinking differently about it. They've been dealing with it since very early on. So I think that there's a real need for hiring at all levels, and not just for to have the pipeline. I think that junior engineers are accelerated by AI possibly more than senior engineers, but it isn't just that the AI does the work they do. I think the type of AI work, the things that AI is good at, is dealing with the details, very average things, bringing all this stuff together, not the innovation, not the thinking, not the spark of ideas. And those spark of ideas come from all grade levels. So I'm still pushing very much for hiring across all grade levels and having every grade level use AI. And one of the things that I'm very sensitive to is this discussion about a junior team member. Every AI company right now is trying to position their pricing to be comparable to a junior programmer, not to $50 a month. Okay? And so there is a large marketing mantra out there to try and convince us all that we should be managing a team of junior programmers from, your favorite, AI company. And so I think that that's I want to separate that marketing message of the AI companies from the reality of what we need to do to get work done. And AI does accelerate a lot of things. I'm never going back to not using it. I'm not saying that. But figuring out how to use it and be really successful with it, I think it can be done at all job levels. And I think even as you're saying, it's not just writing code. That's what we hear about today. But it's all functions in your business. Probably, you need to rethink how it applies.
How is your team using AI, like in terms of like actual implementations within the workflow? And can you use Cursor too much?
Well, okay. Can you use it too much? Yeah. I mean, we do a lot of experiments where we try and do things like, can we get this 100% written with AI to try and learn how to do it and learn the tool? And it's pretty clear that when we get to the finaling touch of it, we're spending 20% of our time to get the last 5% or whatever, right? You're just screwing around to get this thing. Right now, the tools are not good enough to do everything you need all the time. That's 100% clear. So you can muck with them and try and figure out how to do that. And in that, you will learn how to use the tool better, and that's a useful exercise. But you can spend more time screwing around with the tool than you're saving too. It's really easy to do. So we see that. Yeah. We're running Codex and Claude, I would say, we're the ones that right now that we're seeing the most impact from our teams on, but everybody's, that check back next week, it will have changed again. We're using every one of the major tools at Cisco and just trying to figure out how to use them. And this is from designers using Figma and doing prototypes out of that, right through, and it turns out that a designer making a prototype and using the AI to code up the prototype works out better than a programmer using AI to try and figure out how to get the AI to do industrial design from them, right? And that's sort of obvious, the innovation, the real judgment is in the design part. So we're using those types of tools. We're using the tools a lot on testing. We're using the tools a lot on reducing our time to repair on outages for our sort of cloud and deployments. So our SRE teams are using them a lot. And I think that it's just sort of, we're at a very early stage of mucking around with this stuff and figuring out where it works. And the answer has been, most of our teams have been able to find a way that they can accelerate what they're doing with AI.
Yeah, Saba, same question to you. How are you guys using it right now? And again, some of these young engineers, can they be using Cursor too much? Does it create bad habits? What do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, I have a funny story I heard this week, which I don't know if it's using Cursor too much, but we just had this log list with emails in it, and we just needed the emails out of the log list, and it was in a CSV format. So you could just open it in whatever, Google Sheets, and copy the column and be like, I got the emails. But what this developer did is he put it in Cursor and was like, give me the list of emails. So so that's kind of what we're seeing, where it's really, I don't know if it's an over-reliance, but it's just I don't need to think anymore. I will just give Cursor or whatever AI agent, spend a bunch of credits and get the answer. So definitely seeing some of that for sure. But I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just, we're using it for a lot of things. But as for how we're using it, all of our teams are using some kind of AI tools. So we use Cursor heavily, we use Claude. All of our developers pretty much use some kind of AI assisted, either for coding or reviews or testing. It's part of our performance metrics. If you're not using AI, you're, someone will be like, why?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's part of the your performance matrix, right? And so for us at Certn, it's basically the bar. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but even more interestingly, our non-technical teams, so similar to Cullen, product and design, are leveraging it for prototyping, getting ahead of engineering, and that's been a huge unlock for us because one thing that you see a lot on product teams is like this back and forth between product design and engineering. We've came up with a whole bunch of different models to like how to work with that, like the triad, the like all kinds of different like process things to like get those three to like work together. Where with AI tools, you can just be like, well, designer, like just go off with Lovable and like mock a few things or Figma and go back and forth with your ideas while engineering and product can get ahead on other things. So it's actually sped up our development cycle significantly by doing that. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes total sense. Just as a piece of things, I think many people in this room are going to get asked about metrics of AI in your company at some point or another. And we're doing the same thing. We're tracking 7-day and what percentage of our employees use an AI tool on a 7-day basis, on a 30-day basis, and that makes sense. What the metric we keep getting asked to do, and we have not figured out a way to do, and I don't think is a good metric, is how much are we improving our programmer efficiency with it. And the thing that I would tell people is, in the last 50 years, there has never been a good metric of programmer efficiency. And AI hasn't changed that. There still isn't. So it's very difficult to explain to a board or a senior management team that we have no metric for what is probably the most important factor of developing software. But that's where we are. And everybody that makes a metric, all that happens is people game the metric and you get what you measure, and it doesn't result in a good outcome.
Okay, cool. Let's get a little spicy. Saba, I'm curious to start with you. Will AI reduce long-term headcount? And specifically, I want to ask, are QAs, are quality, what does that stand for? Quality assurance. Is that role safe?
No.
No, it's not safe. They're gone. Yeah.
I think so. At least for what we've built at Certn, like we've built agents that test our code in production, in like lower level environments. We've been able to mock out a lot of servers and like API endpoints and everything, and so testing has become really easy. So it's just part of the developer job now. It's no longer its own like function. So that's at least my opinion on it. Especially, like as a developer, you have to now ensure the quality of code that's being written by AI, right? So like you're ensuring the safety of that product as well and of the code that's written. So it's more of like developers are going to have to like lean heavier into testing, but it can no longer be its own function because most of the time that developers are spending time on now is actually code reviews and validating. And I can see a world where, as AI gets better, as AI agents get better, as more code, there's tons of like percentages of like 70% of code is going to be written by AI. Like we will probably get there, but who is validating, who's reviewing that? So that's how I see development getting like shifting towards. The thing that I question is like what happens to mastery? Or like human, like, or joy. Like for me as a developer, I loved writing code. I loved solving problems. I loved like banging my head against something and being like, why isn't this working? And solving it. Like that's a dopamine high. So like what happens when you take that away and the only thing you're doing is managing AI agents or like validating that these 100 agents that you have are writing thousands of lines of code, that thing is working. Is that fun?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the interesting question.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, same question to you. What happens to total headcount? QA, is QA safe?
Man, my answer was going to be exactly the opposite. I was like, QA is going to be the last thing that goes. Like, AI can write everything, but have you seen the garbage that comes out of AI some of the time? Like, QA is going to be there for us, right? But I think you've convinced me. I'm actually on the same page on this. Yeah, I mean, the checking that this is right and the code review and figuring out that AI did the right thing and guiding it the right direction and getting it out, out of the weeds and to where it needs to be, that is going to remain a major portion of what of what people are spending their time doing. It is the more frustrating end of work, doing code. I'm not sure I know a single engineer that deeply prefers code reviews over writing code. And the other thing that I would notice too is when we interview a bunch of our teams that are using AI a lot, and we haven't got our hands around this yet, it's just something that we're sort of learning and trying to figure out, is we find that if you are, arranging a group of Claude agents for 7 hours, at the end of the day, you feel more tired and more stressed out than you would if you were just programming and not using AI. Now, none of those people that are feeling that way want to go back to not using AI. That's not their thing. But they are saying, like, this is just more exhausting than what I used to do. So, I don't know. It's sort of a point we're trying to grapple with and figure out what to do with.
Yeah, cool. Saba, I want to talk to you about, and my sound guy's just saying we're getting a bit of feedback, so just hold the mic a little bit closer, I think is what he's saying. No worries. But I want to talk about data sovereignty. And Canada has a big push, I think, federal budget announced $2 billion. Don't quote me on these numbers, $2 billion to data sovereignty here in Canada, but it seems like every country around the globe cares a lot about building a sovereign cloud. How are you seeing now where you store your data as a company that operates all around the world? Is it becoming a bit of a friction point that you have to have data centers around the globe, or what is that like these days?
Yeah, 100%. So we have, one of the advantages of our architecture is that you can spin up Certn in any AWS region or even Azure. So we take a lot of pride that we've built our architecture in that way because we deal with a ton of PII. I don't know if everyone here knows what Certn does, but we do background checks. So if you apply to a job or a house or need a credit check, we run those through data vendors and return a result. So you can imagine the level of PII that someone would have to share with us for us to run those checks. And so we're a global company. We have clients in Europe, Middle East, North America, Australia, and we work with a lot of governments, and every one of those regions require a data residency to be in that region. So we have instances in Europe, here in North America, in Australia, and now we're even being asked by Middle Eastern customers to set up shop in the Middle East and not send the data out of that region. So it's definitely becoming a hot topic, and it's making our decision on building Certn as a monolith a good decision because it's really easy to spin it up in a new region versus a microservices architecture. So yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing right now.
Yeah, and talk to me a little bit more about Australia, because I think Australia is a bit interesting, right? What goes on in Australia?
Yeah, so Australia has really tight regulations around what you can and can't do with their data, even down to the point where even if you have your data center or your data processing, all of your infrastructure in region, you cannot access it from outside of that region. So when we were building our stack in Australia, we had to convince a developer from here to move there. Thankfully, he was young and wanted to travel, so it's not a problem. But yeah, so you have to be in region, a ton of regulations around who has access to the data and how you can use it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's stick with you, because you mentioned architecture, and I'll jump back on the data sovereignty side, but to go back a little bit on architecture, so how was Certn built? You mentioned a monolith versus microservices, because I remember when we were both at Neo, famously microservices, but you guys chose to build Certn as a monolith. What went behind that decision? And it seems like you're happy now because of the data sovereignty, but are there reasons that make that a better decision?
Yeah, it really came down to around the concept of simplicity and consolidating the domain into one repo. Also, Certn, we're not that big of a dev shop. So right now we're at 30 developers, so quite conservative on the developer side. So the need to spin up microservices just hasn't come up in the architecture. So that's kind of some of the decisions there. And then also, this is the third iteration of Certn. from a platform perspective, and the data residency and domiciling was a huge thing in mind, which informed kind of like a more monolith, easier to spin up in multiple regions architecture.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And how does that affect like AI as you guys use it in, for example, Cursor? Does it make it easier?
It does, yeah, because you can just load the context a lot easier, and you don't have to, basically bring in a whole bunch of different domains into like the one session. Yeah, a ton easier.
Yeah. Cullen, you guys are not a monolith, but
Yeah.
much bigger. You guys run microservices, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about WebEx in particular here because
Okay.
like at Cisco, there's a lot of, there's a zillion products from a zillion companies over times. But let's talk about WebEx as an example because I think it's about 800 microservices right now. And that's a very large number to deal with. It makes spinning up in these new regions really complicated, and we have the same reasons for doing it. I mean, we run a full data center in Canada that was largely to support the Healthcare Act of, the Canadian government requires our healthcare data is not on a computer that is subject to the US Patriot Act. And that's a good law. But that was what caused us to need to spin up, that was the thing that created the business case for a data center here. Similarly, we've spun up data centers in many other places around Europe. We're spinning ones up in the Middle East right now. We have ones in Australia. I find that it's often sort of December, January, February where I'm required to go down to Australia and check out those data centers, help a little bit. I don't know why it's always that time of year, but the windsurfing is good and the kiteboarding is good down there that time of year. Ask me about Perth. Jokes aside, I mean, that is very much the direction the world's going. So we're looking at how to shift our services more and more to make it so it's easier for us to spin up in small things. And this is shifting us towards a smaller number of microservices or reducing more towards that architecture. And there's a bunch of things going for that. One, some of the architecture was clearly designed for scalability, reliability. It's really easier to get some of these 5.9 type services with microservice type architectures. But you can go too far. Some of it's just done because there was a zillion different teams and how many, 50 plus countries, and like everybody, the easiest way to not have to deal with other teams was just have their stuff all be a microservice. That's not a good reason to design it that way, but it's a reason that happened. And so you end up with all of these other reasons why this stuff happens, and we're trying to scale a bunch of that back. And AI with the context, I mean, if you're thinking about what problems you can solve with AI, you do need to think about how much context can I load in and what it does. The number of tokens is going up, but it doesn't really help. It's hard to explain the deep theory on this, but one of the problems is, let's just say you had a model that could take 100 million tokens as the input window to it. It would get lost inside of that itself when we experiment with that. So there is a limit to the sort of amount of context you can load, and you want to keep your code, and so any reasonable, sane sort of system probably fits inside that context. It's not probably too hard. But we have things like the Cisco iOS operating system that runs on some of our older routers. I mean, that had 14,000 people working on a single code base, okay, for 20 plus years. That code base is so large, it does not load in the context of any AI system that's available today. So there is a limit, you need to get the right modularity of breaking this stuff up. And again, I think we've swung too far towards microservices, given the deployment realities of wanting to be able to cheaply spin up in new data centers, which we can't do right now. And so we're moving back the other direction. But this is always sort of a shifting balance.
That's so fascinating. Yeah. Okay, for those of you who maybe were a little lost on the microservices versus monolith conversation, we're going to get into deep fakes. So hopefully, we're back. We're back. But yeah, so on that topic, talking about cybersecurity more generally, AI is posing a lot of threats, especially in deep fakes, in hiring, in even Angelica is getting some, who works at Tech Thursday, is getting some really convincing emails from me saying, call me right now. And she keeps joking that she's about to call. But I'm curious, like, how is AI changing cybersecurity, and what are you guys seeing as, like, preventative measures that you guys are implementing into your companies?
Well, let me start a little bit with what I'm seeing and then pass it over to you and then maybe come back for some of the things that I think is advice you can take away as preventative measures. So the security group at Cisco, Talos, does a lot of the deep threat research in the world for a lot of governments. And so we spend a lot of time seeing these things. A lot of companies that have had bad problems have come to us and we've worked with them. So we get to see, a surprising number of these. I mean, we're getting to the point where there are convincing audio and video fakes of people. I mean, right now, our latest product that we're bringing out for translation, it will translate my voice to a different language. But it actually clones, I mean, we're not shipping this as a cloning technique that I can clone Phil, but it clones me as I'm speaking in what's called a single shot mode where it needs probably less than 9 seconds of my voice to fully clone me, and now it does it well enough that it sounds like me speaking Spanish or a different language, okay? So that's the state of the art. And the attackers have things that are very good at this point. They can make fairly compelling sounding voices. So people are, they're getting phone calls that sound like a person. They're getting videos that look like somebody fairly compelling, particularly if you don't quite know the person, right? And there's all these sort of social engineering type things that go along at the same time. So we're seeing these attacks super on the rise. Pretty much every chief security officer that we talk to, this is a topic of concern for them. And it's it's hit Cisco too. We have hired employees that were not the people we thought we were hired. We have had people that was writing great code and later they were writing bad code, and it took us literally, this is embarrassing to say, but years to figure out that it was no longer the same person. Like, this type of stuff has happened to us, right? And so you see all of this going on, and I think that we have just seeing the tip of the iceberg. Like, you're starting to see the spams and the texts that are in it, right? But as you start getting more phone calls and video calls that are very authentic looking and sounding, usually with a bit of an emergency, maybe at a time you don't like, it really causes pressure to do something right away. And that's where we see things going wrong. And let me hand this over to you.
A few months ago, we did an AI hackathon, and one of the projects that came out of it was deepfake detection in video. And what one of our developers built is this ability for you to, create a deepfake of yourself. It was hilarious. He put Tom Cruise's face on his face, and you could not tell. You're like, this is Tom Cruise interviewing for a job. And then built an AI model to detect the deepfake. Right. So it's really interesting because now you have two competing models. Like, which one is going to be better? Is it going to be the deepfake one, or is it going to be the detecting one? So I think that's where we're going to see some really interesting things where deepfake or fraud models are going to improve maybe faster than detection models. So there's a ton more fraud that we're going to be seeing in hiring, and it's really, really hard to detect. We were doing a ton of hiring earlier or late last year, and I was interviewing someone that at the beginning I was like, oh, this is a real human. But then you can see flickering in the video, the speech was a little off, and you're like, this is AI. This is not a real person. Yeah. And fair enough, I was a bit suspicious. I started asking questions that you wouldn't usually ask, and it completely stumped this person or AI or whatever it was. But
what did you ask? Did you ask what's your deepest insecurity?
No, I should have. I think I asked him what his favorite thing to do outside of work was. Oh. And it completely threw him off. He was like, oh, and back to the job description.
Use tokens. Yeah.
Yeah. We're seeing it in our day-to-day. And so far, the only way to really detect that is by basically having some kind of controls with identity verification, making sure that you're even collecting geolocation information, collecting as much information about the device or where this person is calling from to actually validate that they are they say they are.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a huge need for it. But again, it's going to be like kind of like the race of fraud versus detection, like which one is going to evolve faster, and both are, I would say, like fraud vectors are moving a lot faster than detection.
Wow. Okay.
That's a perfect segue to me. I was going to say, it's like this AI favors the attackers in this case. It is moving much faster. And part of the reason is they only have to win once, and as a defender, you have to win every single time. And so and the other thing that really is bad for the defenders is the attackers get to use your technology to see if they get past it. Like, if you ship a deepfake detection system, it's pretty good at detecting deepfakes that weren't designed to evade it. But it's really bad at design. It's really easy to redesign your deepfakes to get past any given deepfake detection system. So this is a lot like early virus checkers and those types of things, right? It's not a place that favors the attackers or favors the defenders. Well, what do we do about this? I mean, I think that there's a bunch of things, and good systems and processes are the number one thing. It's just what you were saying right there, okay? If somebody is if you have a process in your company that can cause you to send a $500,000 PO to someone else or some cash to them, like, you need a process in place that makes sure that that's safe from these types of attacks. And so this isn't as hard as people think it sounds. Right now we get emails all the time that's like, I'll make jokes about the princess, or the prince has $1 million for you or something. But you get these emails. They're clearly ridiculous. They're clear phishing emails, and we ignore them. That's all right. We're pretty good at doing them. We wouldn't respond or send money just because we got a bank account number that says, this is a bank account number, send me $100,000. So what we have to do is come to grips with the fact that our eyes and our ears are, that this stuff that we're getting that's coming over an electronic medium, there's no more reason to believe it's true than those emails. So we have to get those ideas in place. We've got to get the ideas of understanding identity, strong identity, second factor authentication, all of these things we have to get really working well in our products so we know we're talking to who we think we are. And those have to work cross businesses with different communication forms. So that type of stuff needs to be in place better. And then we get to the thing which every security officer talks to me wants me to tell them how I'm going to do the deep fake detection. It's like, yeah, we'll throw some deep fake detection in as well. But the solution to the spam emails wasn't being able to detect that an email was 100% spam and making sure that we always correctly got it into the spam box or not. It was getting people and processes and identity to change such that we weren't subject to those attacks in the same way. So that's the way that I would really think about it, is go after making sure your processes are right, making sure your identities are right, and you know who you're talking to, you know which developers are hiring. Maybe we could use a company to do that. Those types of things.
Certn, yeah, exactly.
That's the key things in solving these problems, and they are going to explode over the next couple of years.
That's awesome. I want to hand it over to audience Q&A, but maybe a round of applause for these guys. Yeah, that was lovely. I'm also really sorry for anyone here who came thinking that this was like a boxing match or two nerds fighting. But yeah, let's get into some questions. I'll go over here.
Thank you for the great talk. So my question is around the overall trust issues that we have around AI. So like in your organization, when anyone, like you tell your developer that you give him some task and he uses AI. So how do you perceive that overall trust? Because I recently read even Deloitte was penalized by the Canadian government for using AI in the reports, big conferences like NeurIPS, where you saw AI being used in the papers. So how do you see this overall social legitimacy around AI? I just wanted to hear your take on that.
I mean, we really rely on people. We tell people, we encourage you to use AI at the company, but we want you to check the answers and be responsible for them and make sure they're right. We just can't operate with just complete AI slop coming out all the time. So we're pretty negative on that type of thing. And I would bet $1,000 you will not see a legal filing from Cisco with fake made-up references. That's just not going to happen, right? Now, as we use this more and more, stuff is going to slip through and make mistakes. Obviously, we've had AI-generated code that we checked in and had bugs in it. I mean, that was reviewed by a developer and they thought it was right, they missed it, whatever. But we're just trying to figure out a balance there. And what we're asking employees to do right now is be very transparent in how they mark stuff, when AI is being used, and what's happening there. And so that's what we're asking, people that are using it to do. And what we're trying to do as leaders is realize that this is very early, and we're just figuring out how this all works, and there's going to be mistakes. And let's make sure that they're not bad mistakes for our customers.
Yeah, and just thinking on that, like, I think what's interesting in the media is that, like, there's a ton of buzz around, like, okay, this was an AI written report, had mistakes on it, you'll see it in every single headline. But how many human mistakes are in reports, right? Like, I think it's more of taking a look at it that way. Like, for sure, there's going to be bugs in AI generated code, but like, we need to compare it to what the human mistake rate is. So I think that's probably a better approach than like making a ton of buzz or noise in the news around like one article or like one report that had mistakes in it.
Hi, I'm curious. There's a recent conversation that's gaining speed in terms of high work in terms of versus low work. And given that you're both C-suite, I'm curious to know your thoughts on that. High work meaning, the big thinking for the work, and then low work is obviously the kind of daily grind. So I'm curious on your thoughts.
So like thoughts on the difference between the two types of work?
Yes, and whether or not you being both C-suite, which one you agree with, whether you do more of the high work, so to say, or the low work in your day-to-day?
All of it. I'd say like one of the most effective things you can do as a leader is flex within like high work or low work, if we want to use those two categories. So like my job is to do whatever is necessary to unlock my team or like to move something forward. So I would never like be like, oh, that work is something that I shouldn't be doing. For me, it's more of like what needs to get done, how can I get it done, how can I help you. That's kind of the approach that I take in my leadership style.
Yeah, I think this is a different answer for every executive, but I try and focus a third of my time on the sort of longer term, big picture thinking about what our strategy is and those types of things. A third of it is just the grind of keeping the wheels on the bus and the organization going. And a third of it sort of directed towards getting into what are the hardest low-level problems that the people in the trenches are dealing with today and getting myself in the middle of helping fix those. Now, not every CTO is like that, and there's no right answer. There's a whole range of it, but that's how I think of it. And I think that it's very hard for me to continue to be good at my job over a long period of time unless I do all three of those.
Cool. Maybe I have time for 2 more questions. I'll go to one right here.
Hi, Cullen. It's Ivan here. I have a question for you about windsurfing. You mentioned you do windsurfing. You also said that you went in the wrong business of making 300 megabit modems when 1200 was available. So my question is, can you please compare and describe the feelings of catching the right burst of wind and going into the right business idea?
Okay, so I'm going to go way out on a limb here. So I think that when you're trying to, whether you're doing something new at a larger company or whether you're doing a startup company, like I view it as like you're sitting there on a surfboard and you're looking out on the horizon, you're seeing these waves come in, you're trying to pick the right timing, and then you are going to paddle your guts out to try and catch that wave and be riding it. And if you catch it right, it is an exhilarating feeling, right? Like when I'm all in on some new tech or something that we're doing, like we did a hologram system a while back, it's just like, it's taken 70 hours of my week. I get up in the morning thinking about it. I just love it. It's just an exhilarating feeling. I feel the same way when I am, kiteboarding, of just like, I have to be totally focused on the here and now and what I'm doing. And, kiteboarding, windsurfing, they're great. Like, you for a second think about something you shouldn't be thinking about, and you are painfully reminded that you should have been focused on what was happening right then and there as the crash happens, right? So I see a lot of common between, and you see that across a lot of the people who participate in some of these sports, is just a similar type of, I think there's an overlap between the type of intensity and the type of focus you need and the type of thrill you get out of making these things happen in both those types of physical supports and in the type of startups and things I want to do. I suspect you might be similar to this.
Oh, no, not at all. No, I'm a huge cyclist, so not kitesurfing and snowboarder, yeah. So I agree, there is definitely an intersection between the two. Yeah.
All right, last question back here.
So a little disappointed. I thought this was going to be a boxing match, but
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry.
yeah, but it was either that or a hairstyle battle. So I'm interested to know, when it comes to high-performing teams, now over the generations, it keeps changing. Like, what does it mean? So now we see, like, we have Cisco, which is like a big company that's been through many generations of what is a high-performing team, and then we have Certn that, it's working with like 30+ engineers right now, and it's all over the world in different places. So what's your idea now of a high-performing team, and how has that changed from maybe before AI came in?
I wouldn't say it's changed significantly in terms of like, like understanding performance or like what a high-performing team looks like. It's accelerated delivery. It's enabled us to like ship things faster in certain ways and has changed the way the team works. But in terms of performance, I'd say, like you want to understand what a high-performing team looks like and continue to keep that bar and like make sure, that bar is still met. For me, a high-performance team is a team that delivers on the outcomes that you expect it to deliver. How they do that is up to the team, up to how they operate, and how well they work together. Like the best performing teams are teams that really work together super well, communicate effectively, know how to unblock themselves, how to solve problems, are empowered to make their own decisions, don't have to wait on someone else to make a decision, because usually decision making is what slows down your team. So like those dynamics within the team are kind of independent of AI. So we haven't really seen like the fabric of teams deteriorate or change with AI, at least from my experience. What it has done is it kind of like invigorated new developers of like learning new things and being like, oh, look at this thing that I built, and like brought teams together even more. And now the performance gains that we're seeing is on the output and like just the faster delivery.
Yeah, that's really well put, and I think that it's really hard to even describe exactly what a high-performance team is, but you all know it when you see it. And it doesn't matter what size company you're at. They're rare. They're magical when they happen, and they all happen because of people. I think AI is just a tool that teams use and won't change the complexity or the magicalness of having a super high-performance team. But if you can ever, work on one, create one, that is what changes things. So get on one of those teams.
Cool. Guys, that was so much fun. Thank you so much. Give it up for these guys. All right, I want to head over to DJ Tech Thursday. DJ Tech Thursday, spin that shit. Grab a drink.
Thank you.
Stick around. Thanks a lot for coming out, guys.